Good morning. This is John Rhodes, Chair of the Public Service Commission, and I call this session of the Public Service Commission to order. Secretary Phillips, are there any changes to the final agenda?
There are no changes to the final agenda.
Thank you very much. Before we get started, I would like to note our arrangements for session today. In line with the guidelines concerning social distancing and minimizing large gatherings, and in light of executive orders that suspended provisions of the Open Meetings Law on an emergency basis, we are conducting today's session remotely. I'd like to remind those of you who are participating by phone to please mute your lines, except when you are speaking. The public will have the opportunity to listen to the session on the department's webcast page, and we will also record and transcribe the session as has been our practice. These arrangements have been reviewed by our general counsel, and he has found that these meet the requirements of the executive orders and also that they meet my own expectations of honoring the intent of the open meeting law to the maximum extent permitted by our duty to protect the public health of New Yorkers. Before moving to the agenda, I would just like to do a roll call of our commissioners. Please confirm that you're with us when I call your name. Commissioner Diane Berman.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Jim Alisi.
Hello, good morning. I'm here.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Tracy Edwards.
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner John Howard.
I'm here as well, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So with that, we will move into the agenda. The first item for discussion, which is an informational item, is item 202, case 20M0189, which is the report on New York State electric and gas supply readiness for the upcoming winter, presented by Tammy Mitchell, Director, Office of Electric, Gas, and Water, David Maiorello, Utility Engineering Specialist 3, Richard Quimby, Power Systems Operations Specialist 4, Paul Darmetko, Utility Supervisor, and Joseph White, Utility Consumer Assistance Specialist 2. Tammy, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Commissioners. Today's staff will be briefing you on the results of our review of the state's natural gas and electric utilities readiness for the upcoming winter. Next slide, please. Thank you. First, Dave Maiorello will brief you on the readiness of the state's natural gas utilities and then provide you with a projection of average natural gas bills for the coming winter. Richard Quimby will update you on the readiness of the bulk electric system, followed by Paul Darmetko, who will discuss the projections for electricity prices for the coming winter. And Joseph White will conclude the panel with a discussion of outreach efforts related to winter bills and safety. Overall, both natural gas and electric utilities are prepared to meet customer needs for the upcoming winter season. I'll now turn it over to Dave Maiorello to discuss the natural gas utilities supply projections and forecasted gas prices. Dave?
Next slide, please. Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Commissioners. I am Davide Maiorello, and I serve as Utility Engineering Specialist in the Pipeline Safety and Reliability section of the Office of Electric, Gas, and Water. I will brief you on the results of our annual review into the readiness of the state's natural gas utilities for the upcoming winter. Although each of us will provide more detail, overall, the New York gas utilities are taking action prepared for the coming winter. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Our state's gas utilities are also called electric distribution companies, or LDCs. Based upon our review of the representations by the LDCs, regarding natural gas supply readiness for the upcoming winter heating season, staff concludes that the LDCs serving New York State have completed their contracting for adequate natural gas supply, delivery capacity, and storage inventory to satisfy current firm customer demands under design winter conditions for this winter. Staff continues to coordinate with oil industry representatives and the New York State Energy and Research Development Authority, or NYSERDA, to ensure that customers have access to adequate supplies of winter heating fuels. Each utility has a unique mix of assets, including pipeline capacity, storage, as well as compressed and liquefied natural gas used to serve a unique mix of customers. Interruptible customers, or those that have the ability to stop natural gas usage during periods of high demand, are important providers of demand response service and reduce the amount of pipeline capacity needed to serve winter load. Recent filings made by LDCs and rate cases focus on the use of demand response and non-pipes alternatives, including energy efficiency to meet growing demand, especially in areas where local governments seek to phase out dirtier heating fuels such as fuel oil and propane. We continue to monitor some areas of the state where demand is growing at a faster pace and where the existing distribution system is becoming constrained, including New York City, Westchester, and the Capital District. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. One more. Thank you. The LDCs purchase gas to supply their customers' winter needs in three ways, and this is represented by the pie chart on this slide. The first way is by filling their natural gas storage facilities during the summer when demand is low. The second way is by hedging, which acts like an insurance policy to guarantee the volatility of the gas price will not be too high. The third way is by purchasing at the prevailing market price, which fluctuates with market forces and is called flowing gas. Despite a drop in the price of storage gas, both flowing gas and hedged gas are forecasted to be slightly higher than last year. The price of natural gas is influenced by many factors, with weather being chief among them. Next slide, please. Flowing and hedged gas forecasts are both influenced by NYMEX futures trading. Despite historically low gas prices this year, traders anticipate higher costs with this winter. This chart indicates that despite the increased forecasted prices are well within the price range over the last 5 years. Next slide, please. This winter, we expect the average residential customer's winter heating bill to be about $793, and this is assuming normal weather, but this varies by utility. This is higher than last winter in large part due to the fact that last winter was unusually mild compared to typical weather. Next slide, please. Earlier this year, a generic proceeding to investigate natural gas utility planning processes was instituted. Staff is currently in the process of reviewing the filings submitted by our LDCs regarding both the vulnerable areas on their systems and their proposals for a new long-term planning process. We have also received proposals from other stakeholders that will be taken into consideration in staff's proposal. And this proposal will be filed in the near future for public comment. Next slide, please. In conclusion, our review indicates that the LDCs serving New York have secured adequate contracts for supplies of natural gas to meet expected firm customer requirements this winter. However, staff will continue our traditional monitoring of supply, prices, and interruptible customer compliance throughout the winter and report any situations that require Commission attention, as well as ongoing work on some interstate pipelines to ensure system integrity. Staff will continue to work with the LDCs and interested communities to find innovative solutions to the challenges represented by increased demand for natural gas. This concludes my portion of the presentation, and I will be happy to take questions after the panel is finished. I will now turn it over to Richard.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Commissioners. My name is Richard Quimby, and I am a Power Systems Operations Specialist in the Department's Electric Safety and Reliability section. I am here today to brief you on staff's review of the bulk electric systems preparedness for the upcoming 2020-2021 winter period. At the outset, I would like to say that based on our review, we conclude that the bulk electric system is prepared to meet reliability of the state's winter electric demands. Next slide, please. This chart shows the summer and winter historic coincident peaks since year 2000. It also shows that New York State is a summer peaking state and therefore has to have sufficient available capability to meet loads well above those typically experienced during the winter. Last year's winter actual electric peak load was 23,253 megawatts. This was 2,485 megawatts lower than the all-time winter peak of 25,738 megawatts, which occurred in a prolonged cold spell during the 2013-2014 winter, which we refer to as the polar vortex. The electric peak forecast for the upcoming winter period is 24,130 megawatts. Next slide, please. This slide summarizes the resources expected to be available to New York during the winter. These resources include generation, demand and response resources called special case resources, and purchases from outside of New York State. These resources are offset by expected unavailability or outage of generation resources. The Nyso expects to have 36,388 megawatts in net capacity resources available during the winter to serve the forecasted winter peak load of 24,130 megawatts. Once operating reserves, which are resources available to meet sudden system contingencies, are accounted for, there remains a capacity margin of 9,638 megawatts. In short, we have sufficient capability to serve the forecasted load during the upcoming winter. Next slide, please. A winter coordination protocol is in place to facilitate communication between state agencies and the Nyso in circumstances where fuel supply for generating facilities may be at risk or if generator owner needs a fuel specification waiver from the DEC to maintain reliability. The state agencies involved are DPS, DEC, NYSERDA, and DOT. As part of staff's winter assessment, we reached out to major generating facility owners in Southeast New York who own about 12,000 megawatts of dual fuel generation capability. The dual fuel capability enables generators to burn either natural gas or oil depending on the situation, which can be driven by economics or unavailability of one of the fuels. We found that these owners are continuing to implement lessons learned from past winter experiences, including having increased pre-winter on-site fuel resources, having firm contracts with fuel oil suppliers, conducting more aggressive replenishment plans, and having more proactive pre-winter maintenance and facility preparations. Staff also met with the Nyso and discussed its procedures and protocols for the winter period. In recent years, the Nyso has instituted various changes to help ensure electric reliability during periods of tight natural gas supply, including closely monitoring generator fuel levels and replenishments. In addition, the Nyso has improved communications with interstate pipelines, local gas distribution companies, and neighboring ISOs during periods of tight electric operating conditions. That concludes my presentation. I will now turn it over to Paul. Thank you.
Hi, could you move to the next slide, please? Good morning, Chair Rhodes. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Paul Darmetko, and I'm a Utility Supervisor in the Upstate Rates and Tariffs section. As Tammy mentioned, I'll be providing you with some information on how the utilities have performed at reducing the electric supply price volatility for their full-service residential customers. I'll talk a little bit about the statewide portfolio that the utilities have in place this winter, and also provide you with an estimate of what the statewide full-service residential customer supply rate may look like this coming winter compared to the last few years if we experience normal weather. Next slide, please. So this graph shows the results of the utility's electric supply price volatility mitigation efforts since December of 2008. It compares the average New York ISO day-ahead market price volatility, the red line, with the volatility of the utility's residential electric supply portfolios, the blue line. Each point represents the price volatility over a 12-month period as measured by the coefficient of variation. The high point that you see on the graph represents the volatility that was experienced due to the polar vortex of 2014, which resulted in increased market prices and increased price volatility. Even though customers benefited from the hedges that the utilities had in place, the bill impacts that customers experienced were high. As a result of lessons learned, the utilities modified certain aspects of their hedging programs. These changes included increasing the fixed price hedge level for their residential supply customers during the winter months from about 55% to about 70% on a statewide average basis, as well as certain utilities maintaining multiple portfolios to better hedge their customers located in different regions of their service territories. As you can see, the utilities have continued to perform well at reducing the portfolio price volatility compared to the market. And similar to the last few years, this winter the utilities have maintained on average a 70% fixed hedge level to mitigate market price volatility if it occurs. Next slide, please. So this slide compares the last few years of the statewide average full-service residential supply price to what we estimate the price to be this winter season if we experience normal weather. As you can see, at this point going into the winter, we project that on a statewide average basis, the full-service residential commodity price will be about a penny per kilowatt hour higher than last winter. This is mainly due to last winter being very mild. As you can see, the commodity price is expected to be about the same as the 5-year average. This is, however, a statewide average, so depending on where customers are located, this will vary. It'll also vary based on how cold the winter is. If it's a mild winter, we would expect that the price be more in line with last winter. If it's colder than normal winter, we would expect the price to be higher, although mitigated by the utilities' hedges. So in closing, if the weather does turn cold or if other system conditions occur that would cause the market price of electricity to spike, utilities have taken steps to protect their full-service residential customers through their volatility management programs. Also, as of right now, if we experience a normal winter, it's projected that full-service statewide residential commodity price will be higher than last year, but right around the 5-year average. That concludes my portion of the presentation. I'll now turn the presentation over to Joseph.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Commissioners. My name is Joseph White, and I am in the Outreach and Education section of the Office of Consumer Services, where I serve as a Utility Consumer Assistance Specialist. During the coming winter months, many New Yorkers will face the difficulty of managing energy costs due to the challenging economic conditions. This situation will be particularly hard on the elderly families with fixed or low incomes. This report describes the outreach efforts being implemented by the department staff and New York State Energy Utilities to provide consumers with information to help them manage their energy usage-related bills. and to help raise awareness of consumer protections available during the 2020-2021 winter season. Next slide, please. Both the department and the utilities will promote messages regarding expected energy pricing, and will focus on the following key messages. 1, ways to manage winter bills, including bill payment programs, such as budget billing and deferred payment agreements, and financial assistance programs such as the Home Energy Assistance Program, also known as HEAP. Number 2, cold weather rules and other measures that will protect consumers from service termination and the resources available to assist consumers faced with heat-related energy emergencies. Number 3, simple, affordable measures consumers can take to reduce energy use and become more energy efficient, which may help to lower their bills. Safety information regarding natural gas, electricity, carbon monoxide, and storm-related interruptions. Next slide, please. This year's program continues on our ongoing efforts to reach consumers through a grassroots strategy. However, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, our winter preparedness campaign will focus on finding new ways to reach utility customers through these important messages. In lieu of in-person events, we will concentrate on using the department's websites, toll-free numbers, and social media channels, as well as connecting with our partner organizations through email and our online platform to get our messages out to the utility customers. Specifically, we will develop plain language publications that highlight our core messages. The publications will be available on the Ask PSC website for downloading and printing. All winter campaign publications will be in English and Spanish, and some may be available in other languages including Chinese, Haitian Creole, Bengali, Korean, and Russian. To extend the outreach of our program, we will utilize our statewide network of over 6,000 consumer leaders, local governments, social service organizations and agencies, and community organizations and we will invite these leaders to work with us in educating consumers about their winter energy costs. We will direct them to the Ask PSC site, where our materials will be available in digital format for our partners to share with their constituents. In addition to providing partners with our educational materials, we are developing a series of workshops for targeted consumer leader groups, such as those that serve the low-income customers. The workshops will focus on our main winter preparedness messages: bill management, consumer protections, energy efficiency, tips and safety, as well as information about the COVID-19 termination moratorium. These workshops will increase our efforts to reach New Yorkers, and they will also be available. We will also be available to provide virtual presentations to consumer groups upon request. To further increase our reach to New York's consumers and make information more accessible to the virtual community, we will post the information to the department's social media platforms, such as Facebook and Twitter. And we will put these links on our Ask PSC Ask Winter pages on the department's Facebook page. We can also explore recording workshop presentations and posting them on the page as well. We will develop a list of tips, sound bites that can be tweeted out on a regular basis through our winter months. We will develop a graphic that can be used on our partners' websites that link directly back to the Ask PSC winter page. Next slide, please. In addition to the department's outreach program, the utilities also implement outreach programs, which include winter preparedness information, messages that focus on bill payment and financial assistance programs, storm preparation measures, winter safety and energy efficiency tips, rebates and incentive programs. The utilities are using a variety of delivery vehicles to reach their customers, including email campaigns, text alerts, news releases, radio and paid media ads, bill inserts, bill envelope messages, newsletters, on-hold telephone messages, website features, and social media platforms such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The utilities are also working with municipal and elected officials to partner with human service organizations and community groups. Some utilities are also taking advantage of smart meter technology to alert customers about energy usage and offer tips about energy savings actions that could be help to reduce their bills. Finally, the utilities provide training to their consumer advocates and call center staff on winter messaging and customer assistance. In conclusion, the Office of Consumer Services Winter Energy Outreach and Education Program is designed to ensure that New York State utility customers have access to information about programs that will help them manage their winter energy bills and educate them to be more energy efficient. Staff will continue to monitor the need for additional outreach education efforts during these uncertain times. We will work with utilities to make modifications as needed throughout the heating season. That concludes my portion of this presentation. I will now return our presentation back to Tammy. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Chair Rhodes and Commissioners, this concludes our presentation on the natural gas and electric utility winter preparedness. We're now available for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Tammy. And thank you, Dave, Richard, Paul, and Joe. A very well done report. And also a report that brings good news that we've got reassuring outlooks on supply and costs for our customers, and that we are in a very good state of readiness in terms of our customer communications and outreach and protection approaches for all New Yorkers. I appreciate the work that led to the readiness, and also the work that went into the report. Thank you very much. Commissioner Berman, any questions or comments?
Thank you so much. This is Commissioner Berman. I just really have, first of all, thank you to staff for the presentations. I really just want to highlight three things. Information, especially on HEAP and then emergency HEAP, and the timelines to sign up for the applications and where to get that information is really, really critical. So to the extent that we stay on top of that and include that in our outreach and social media, education is really important. Second is, I do want to give a shout out to the Life webinar series. I happened to listen to part of the one this week on the Low Income Forum on Energy on HEAP updates for 2020-2021 heating season. I thought it was really well done. I try to listen to all of the different webinar series that are put on with NYSERDA, with various stakeholders, including Pope, who's been really active in helping with that, and also the Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance. So those are also on NYSERDA's website. And if there's a way that we can ensure that we're working in tandem to get that information out to critical people, I think that's important information, and people can benefit that. And the third thing is just a comment. Last year at this time, October is always when we do our winter preparedness session. I do note that last year the presentation also focused on the fact that we were waiting for the supply constraint report and the investigation that was being done on gas issues in the state. So I am concerned that while last year we talked about that, and that, you know, it evolved into many different things, and we still haven't seen necessarily a more comprehensive report, and a few different ones. there is a slide here that was discussed on the gas planning proceeding that was opened, and I do think it's important for us to have some clarity on our processes and other things that were done that haven't necessarily, had that much follow through. So I just take note of the fact that, this is important, and especially as supply constraint and curtailment issues, are important to address, especially if events happen that make us have to look at curtailment. It's an important issue. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lisi, any questions or comments?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we are living in a time of so much uncertainty, this report is reassuring, to say the least. And once again, we see the value of the exceptional effort and talent of our staff. It's great work, and thank you. I'll be embracing this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards?
No questions. Just want to thank the staff for a comprehensive review, and it's good to see that we're in good shape going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have one comment and one question. My comment is to echo Commissioner Berman's concern, as I shared with the downstream interruptions that could have a major impact on New York State's gas supply, and that remind everyone that we are at the end of the supply chain, and things that happen outside our jurisdiction could have major impacts on our supply. So keeping on top of that is essential. The second, and this is more of a question, is given that we have so many utility customers currently in arrears before we even begin our heating system, I want to know what mechanisms, either through bills or making it much more explicitly in bills, that customers know that through the governor's executive orders that they cannot be cut off for being in arrears, and that we don't allow utilities to unfairly scare customers into cutoffs that are not allowable. So can somebody sort of elaborate on how we communicate that as well on top of the existing programs that may exist?
Good afternoon, sir. I do believe that we do have a campaign right now that's being assembled, and some of the pages are already up, explicitly explaining. Oh, I'm sorry, this is Joseph White. I apologize. Explicitly explaining the moratorium on shutoffs. We developed a new page that's on our Ask PSC website, and you could go right there and look at it. It's available for everyone to see. If someone else wants to maybe elaborate on what would be in the utility companies bills, but I do know that there are messages that the utility companies are putting out in their billing. Just from my presentation, I did have that information. They are putting information in the bill about customer protection, shutoffs, deferred payment agreements. I have other staff from my office with me here. If any of them want to add anything, please do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, thanks to the staff and to our presenters for excellent work. I guess, I'm sorry, Commissioner Howard, did that response satisfy you? I jumped the gun.
Yes, I would just hope that particularly as this winter season goes on, and as I believe that the amount of uncollectibles goes up, and potentially the number of individual customers with uncollectible issues goes up, that we remain vigilant and make sure that utilities, as they do communicate either through bills or through other mechanisms, make it very clear to customers that the cutoff moratorium exists.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Howard. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, thank you, team. So thank you for that informational item and the report. We'll now move to the second item for discussion, which is the first item on which we will vote. Item 203, case 20M0499, which is in the matter regarding the need for reporting risks related to climate change, presented by Craig Henry, Chief, Finance Policy. Doris Stout, Director, Office of Accounting, Audits, and Finance, is available for questions. Craig, please begin.
Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Commissioners. This is Craig Henry. I am Chief of Finance Policy in the Office of Accounting, Audits, and Finance. The draft order before the Commission today institutes a proceeding to evaluate alternative climate-related financial disclosure frameworks for New York's electric and gas utility operating companies. The threat posed by climate change and its potential impacts on all aspects of the economy are broadly recognized. As the draft order asserts, the potential impact on public utilities of climate-related risk is central to the continued provision of safe and adequate service across the state while protecting the natural environment. So why are we proposing to act now? Over the past several years, there's been a profound reassessment among investors regarding the magnitude of the risk posed by climate change. This has prompted investors to demand that companies help them understand not only the physical risks associated with climate change, but also the manner in which evolving climate policies will impact demand, prices, costs, and ultimately the financial risks that businesses face. In response to these investor-driven demands, there have been numerous climate-related financial disclosure frameworks that have evolved, all of which are intended to promote more informed investment decisions that will enable investors to better understand their exposure to climate-related risks. These disclosure frameworks include the Financial Stability Board's Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD, which in 2017 released recommendations calling for a uniform set of corporate climate-related financial disclosures. Others include the Climate Disclosure Project, or CDP, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, CDSB, the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, the International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC, and the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, SASB. Other efforts have sought to drive better alignment of these frameworks with the disclosures recommended by the TCFD, including the Corporate Reporting Dialogue, which started the Better Alignment Project in 2018. Utility trade groups have also been engaged. The American Gas Association and the Edison Electric Institute have developed a joint ESG and sustainability template. And more recently, the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission released a report just last month emphasizing the importance of undertaking climate risk analysis to better inform decision-making across the financial system, regulators, and financial institutions. The draft order notes that several of the parent holding companies of New York's 11 major electric and gas utilities are signatories to the TCFD, and that others have adopted alternative frameworks for disclosing climate risk. While those companies have committed to fully adopting the TCFD's recommendations and alternative frameworks in their disclosures to their investors, it is important to recognize that this information is aggregated at the holding company level and it is not utility specific. It is also important to note that New York's largest electric and gas utilities have more than $52 billion in capital, and in just the past year have raised some $6.2 billion through their debt issuances. Given these companies' significant assets and their changing physical infrastructure needs, increased transparency of their specific climate-related financial risks would allow better planning and investment consistent with the state's climate goal of a carbon-neutral economy by 2050. For that reason, the draft order seeks to solicit comments from interested parties on the pros and cons and the costs and benefits of providing climate financial disclosure statements, whether utility operating companies in New York should be required to issue annual climate financial disclosure statements, and which climate financial disclosure approach should be followed, and whether a consistent model must be used by all utilities. Once these comments are received and evaluated, staff will formulate a recommendation and return to the Commission for further actions as needed. That concludes my remarks. Doris Stout and I are available for questions.
Thank you, Craig. This is John Rhodes. That was very succinctly and clearly presented. My own view is that today we can act to increase the necessary and valuable transparency on climate-related risk to the utilities that operate here in New York. We have a chance to ensure focus by management, by investors, by lenders, so that these utilities will be best positioned to provide safe and reliable service to their customers, to our co-New Yorkers in the years ahead. I think this is a valuable initiative to initiate, and I am going to be supportive of this item. Commissioner Berman.
Thank you. I just have a process question before I give my thoughts here. One of the questions I have is, we are talking about, potentially looking at these climate-related risk disclosures to be included annually with the utilities' financial reports. What's the next step process in terms of this order, and when we expect, what we might be doing with this? Let's talk a little bit about the process, but also when you talk about looking at this in utilities financial reports, talk a little specifically about which reports, where are they going, who's evaluating, et cetera. Thank you.
Craig, do you want me to take that?
Sure.
Sure. So this is Doris Stout. The draft order requests comments to be filed within 30 days. Once those comments are received, staff will likely review them, write up a full recommendation that can be then SAPA'd for further consideration. That SAPA process runs for a few months, and then we would come back to the Commission with a final recommendation to whether it be, to implement a certain approach or how that would be implemented going forward. Our annual reports, our financial annual reports, the traditional ones that we receive, aren't received until the end of the first quarter, generally at the end of March. And so I think the timing would be a little tight to get the climate-related financial disclosures in at the same time, but we might be able to follow up with the climate-related financial disclosures somewhat thereafter. But we'll have to evaluate how things progress and the timing of it.
Okay. All right, thank you. That's very helpful, because I do know that many companies might be looking at that and trying to figure out what that means for their filings in March. Just from where I come from, I look at this as overall, this issue is a really important one. Climate financial disclosure is something that I think most forward-thinking companies, and especially in New York, I really think that there's a solid foundation among all of our utilities in what they're doing and on which we can look at how to build further. For me, as a regulator, I look at it really in the framework of other things that we've looked at with, ESG in particular. Before, a few years ago, environmental, social, and governance issues were only something that a few investors and a small minority population were deliberately looking at it. And today it's really much more mainstream. Most of the big institutional investors are applying a environmental, social, and governance lens on investing. And many of individual investors and customers in general are also looking at this. I do see that these issues are really important, and we're at an inflection point. And in our utility regulatory space, these are significant issues that not only the companies, investors, and customers have to increasingly grapple with, but we as a regulator need to be looking about and asking ourselves what our specific role is in this space. But it is something that, from my perspective, is not unique to what we're already currently doing. We have an incredible staff fiscally looking at these issues and evaluating them. But companies are already currently providing a lot of publicly available information. Many companies have, in New York, have clean energy commitments. They also file numerous SEC filings. They have sustainability reports. And it really is also, in many ways, tied into and incorporated in how we look at the rate plans, and when we go into evaluating the success of many of our regulatory policies. And for example, environmental and social aspects are considered through our energy efficiency programs, advancing REV and DG issues, methane reduction through LPP replacement, site investigation and remediation, water conservation, low-income affordability programs. We've also created a number of incentive mechanisms to advance these areas through positive revenue adjustments and EAMs, including carbon reduction metrics. And we do address the governance aspects to some degree through merger agreements and management audits. And we look at the board qualifications and a local focus. We do need to be mindful of not being prescriptive or over micromanaging and in seeking to impose inappropriately governance structure on the utilities. Our financial staff does review and look at impacts on the bond rating, how these ESG factors into those considerations. I'm struck also just knowing that, we recently saw some folks focused on, some regulatory concern and uncertainty with some of our utilities because of our COVID-19 proceeding and where that may land or not and how that will impact. So from my perspective, I think that we need to be mindful that this is something that is important, but it is something that I do think we've seen, as I said, the solid foundation that the utilities are building upon. There's been, in fact, after Superstorm Sandy, there was a proven record in the hardening and storm hardening and other resiliency activities that were done to show that there was a focus on shoring up that infrastructure. And for me, I think the most important thing is looking at in what exactly the framework is that's important for us to give a signal that we care about these things, but not treat it in such a siloed way that it has unintended negative consequences. And really, all industries and utilities in particular should be looking at climate risk and ESG considerations, but the focus really is on what's material, what is necessary for comprehensive disclosure that will inform people and also give some ability to compare how well folks are doing, and also be helpful to overall the assessing and managing and mitigating climate risk and other factors that can help inform the ongoing strategic activities that companies are doing, and that we as regulators should really be looking at. Is our current regulatory framework supporting the need to respond to the physical effects of climate change or other ESG factors? And are we doing it in a way that is prudently helping folks in this space without being overly prescriptive or overly micromanaging? And to the extent that we look at what's necessary from a reporting disclosure perspective versus a regulatory perspective and how those might overlap. I would like to make sure that we're also being comprehensive in all the other ways that are currently available for folks to look at the information. It's, you know, and who's the audience, whether it's investors, whether it's a regulator, or whether it's the customers, and how is that information conveyed. I would guess that our utilities currently deal with somewhere between 10 and 30 equity and credit research analysts, including rating agencies, asking for information. There are probably about 150 to 200 firms that provide ESG ratings for companies, and that number is increasing. So we have to be mindful that our utilities need to be able to manage this heavy volume for data requests and divergent rating methodologies, and looking at what is it that we're ultimately trying to do, and ensuring that the focus here is one that helps to give a clear, concrete next steps without sort of bogging down things in a way that is not helpful. So from my perspective, my bottom line is I think it's important for these discussions. I think we need to be mindful of working together in a collaborative way, as we've seen in other things that have been successful. We need to be able to gain information on the good work that the utilities are currently doing and helping to build upon that. And I think it is important to focus on, you know, ESG or climate risk or other metrics and reporting that's not new to the utility industry. I do recognize there's an increased focus on what they are tracking as they think about the industry and how it's evolving, and where they may need to go in order to support information to customers, communities, and society as a whole. So it is a good thing that we look at and examine how to pursue a systematic approach to risk management and reporting. I think we, especially because the utilities are already in this space, I'm sure that this will also be a good opportunity to showcase some specific things that they are doing already to show the benefits. And at the end of the day, what we want measured, what gets managed, what gets disclosed, has to be done in a way that is helping us in looking at the metrics and targets to assess and manage relevant risks and help on strategic next steps. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lisi, any questions or comments?
Just a quick comment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. We recognize as much as the public relies on utilities, the utilities also rely on investors. And we know from this report and from just everyday knowledge now that climate change clearly does pose a risk to investors. And climate risk assessment will enable those investors to make prudent choices and help provide financial stability in that market sector. But as was said earlier, we have more to see, and hopefully we'll gain more knowledge as we progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Edwards?
No, I don't have any questions. I think it's important that we move forward with this. It's important work. It's necessary work, and I appreciate the briefing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Howard?
Yeah, I have one question about the actual focus of our studies. Will they be exclusively for the New York properties, given that most of our investor-owned utilities are part of very large multinational conglomerates, and that will climate issues outside of New York and these affiliated companies, will they be included in this potential risk evaluation?
So this is Craig Henry. The intent of this is to get information that is at the operating company level, whereas the parent companies obviously are providing information that aggregates all their activities to their shareholders. We're looking for information that is specific to the New York utility operating companies so that the decision-making can focus specifically on how their assets are operated.
And will that include a comparison of New York assets, how a large company behaves in New York as opposed to it may behave differently in other part of its affiliated companies?
So we're at this point, this is Craig Henry again. At this point, we're soliciting comments from interested parties. I think we're certainly willing to listen to the varying viewpoints, and maybe there are some reasons to be concerned about what's going on in other jurisdictions. I think the comments should shed some light on that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Doris.
No, I think that was a good response.
Well, I would encourage to take the broadest view possible on these companies, particularly those that operate internationally, where certain companies, particularly those that operate in the European Union and other things, that may have a more aggressive climate agenda than we do have in New York, even though ours is extraordinary. But again, I would hope that we would take a broader view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, we will move to call for a vote. For the record, this is John Rhodes, and my own vote is in favor of the recommendation to establish the proceeding and seek comments as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
I concur.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard, how do you vote?
I will also be voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendation is adopted. So we'll now move to the third item for discussion, which is item 301, case 15E0302, as it relates to proposed modifications of the Clean Energy Standard, presented by Tom Rienzo, Chief Clean Energy Programs. Tom Dwyer, Assistant Counsel, and Warren Myers, Director, Office of Market and Regulatory Economics, are available for questions. Tom, if you're ready, please begin.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Commissioners. Item 301 is a draft order approving modifications to the Clean Energy Standard, or the CES, in order to align that program with the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, or the CLCPA. These modifications were proposed as part of a June 18, 2020 white paper jointly prepared by staff of the Department of Public Service and the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, or NYSERDA. In addition, the draft order approves with modification a January 27, 2020 petition submitted by NYSERDA seeking to establish a competitive Tier 2 program through which NYSERDA would competitively procure renewable energy certificates, or RECs, from eligible existing in-state renewable resources in order to provide compensation for the beneficial environmental attributes associated with their generation. The white paper proposes to use existing regulatory and procurement structures established under the Renewable Energy Standard, or the RES, to meet the various CLCPA targets. Specifically, the white paper proposed the alignment of the CES eligibility with the definition of renewable energy systems in the CLCPA, as codified in the Public Service Law Section 66P. The adoption of average annual procurement targets for Tier 1 and offshore wind, modifications to the Tier 1 and offshore wind procurement solicitation process, the creation of a new Tier 4 that would support renewable energy projects that deliver energy into New York Independent System Operators, or New York ISO's Zone J, which is New York City. The adoption of a new repowering requirements for existing facilities that receive Tier 1 eligibility. The adoption of a mechanism to address NYSERDA's shortfall in the Zero Emissions Credit, or ZEC, obligation collections. The establishment of new funding mechanisms for NYSERDA's administrative costs, and the establishment of new reporting requirements. In regard to eligibility, the white paper proposed to align the definition of eligible technologies listed in Appendix A of the August 1st, 2016 CES Framework Order with the definition of renewable energy systems contained in the CLCPA. The CLCPA definition differed from the current eligible technologies in three notable ways. The CLCPA did not allow for the combustion of biomass or biogas. The CLCPA includes all hydroelectric resources as eligible energy systems, while the CES Framework Order limited eligibility to upgrades of existing facilities and new low-impact run-of-the-river facilities, so long as such facilities did not add new storage. The draft order continues these same eligibility requirements for hydroelectric resources for all future Tier 1 solicitations, although I should note the draft order does authorize NYSERDA to procure RECs from a broader array of hydroelectric resources under a new Tier 4, including impounded hydro. The CLCPA included fuel cells as eligible so long as they do not utilize fossil fuel sources in the process of generating electricity. The CES Framework Order included all fuel cells as eligible technology without regard to fuel source. The white paper proposes limiting eligibility to those fuel cells that utilize non-fossil fuel resources such as hydrogen, but excluded renewable biogas. The draft order modifies that recommendation and expands the definition of eligible fuels to include renewable biogas. The draft order adopts the CLCPA 70 by 30 goal and the 9,000 megawatt offshore wind goal. In order to achieve those targets, the item sets annual Tier 1 and offshore wind solicitation targets. The average annual Tier 1 procurement target is approximately 4,500 gigawatt hours per year over 2021 to a 2026 period. By comparison, the current solicitation has a procurement target of 1,600 gigawatt hours, and the largest Tier 1 solicitation to date achieved approximately 3,000 gigawatt hours. For offshore wind, the draft order sets an average annual capacity procurement target between 750 and 1,000 megawatts per year through 2027. The draft order authorizes NYSERDA to conduct these solicitations beginning in 2021 without either a minimum or maximum quantity limitation in any given year. In addition to setting solicitation targets, the draft order makes several modifications to the solicitation process. It authorizes NYSERDA to conduct all future offshore wind solicitations without the need to seek additional commission authorization. It authorizes NYSERDA to resell offshore RECs directly to load-serving entities, or LSEs, for voluntary compliance, thus reducing the overall LSE OREC obligation. For the time being, offshore wind development will continue to rely on direct radial connections while alternative transmission approaches are evaluated. The draft order adopts the white paper's proposal to combine project viability with operational flexibility and peak coordinates into a single evaluation factor and apply a 20% weight to that combined factor. However, this modification does not change the overall 70-30 price-non-price evaluation ratio. NYSERDA is authorized to reject the bid based on the unanimous determination of the technical evaluation panel that the project is not presently viable. The order directs NYSERDA to consult with staff, the New York ISO, and the distribution utilities to develop new portfolio risk factors for future Tier 1 solicitations intended to take into account the interactive effects caused by increased penetration of renewable energy resources on the grid. Any new portfolio risk factors developed shall be presented in detail in subsequent solicitation documentation and shall include an explanation of how the factors would be applied in the solicitation process. In addition to the modifications of existing CES tiers, the draft order also authorizes NYSERDA to create a new tier in the CES that aim to increase the penetration of new renewable energy delivered into New York City, Tier 4. The draft order adopts the white paper's proposal to be compensated under Tier 4. A resource must either be located in Zone J or deliver energy to Zone J over a new transmission interconnection. A transmission interconnection will be considered new for the purposes of Tier 4 if it electrically interconnects after the date of this order. The draft order concludes that it would be inadvisable at this time to set a predetermined price cap for Tier 4 RECs, as proposed in the white paper. Instead, to ensure that Tier 4 REC prices are reasonable in relation to the value of the environmental attributes and other benefits they provide, NYSERDA and DPS staff are required to file an agreement to procure Tier 4 RECs with the Commission. Those agreements will be made available for public comment. The Commission will decide whether to approve or deny any such agreement based on whether that agreement advances public interest. Eligibility for Tier 4 will be open to all renewable energy systems. However, non-hydroelectric resources must achieve commercial operation after the date of this order to be eligible for Tier 4. Hydroelectric resources are not subject to this vintage requirement. Large impounded hydro is eligible for Tier 4 as long as it does not create a new impoundment after the date of the white paper. In response to suggestions and comments, the draft order deems offshore wind and behind-the-meter resources as ineligible for Tier 4. The white paper proposes two conditions on projects bidding into Tier 4: the supplier energy baseline, designed to promote the state's economic interests, namely to avoid redirecting existing renewable deliveries into Tier 4, and the supplier greenhouse gas baseline, designed to ensure that deliveries under Tier 4 are not simply backfilled by fossil resources elsewhere in the supplier's system. The draft order notes that to rigidly apply the supplier greenhouse gas baseline could result in unintended consequences of both compromising the cost effectiveness of Tier 4 program and encouraging uneconomic dispatch. Therefore, NYSERDA is directed to solicit Tier 4 bids, both with and without the supplier energy baseline, and to evaluate them on their overall value to the state. As noted earlier, all material terms of the agreement would be subject to the Commission's review and to determine whether the agreement as a whole advances the public interest. As for the supplier greenhouse gas baseline, it is central to the integrity of the Tier 4 concept and cannot be compromised. The draft order strengthens the supplier greenhouse gas baseline to ensure that it does not inadvertently incentivize the construction of new hydroelectric impoundments to serve the supplier's native load while serving Tier 4 via existing impoundments. NYSERDA will have the flexibility to develop rules for suppliers to satisfy the supplier greenhouse gas baseline. As with Tier 1 and offshore wind, there is no minimum procurement quantity for Tier 4. Unlike Tier 1 and offshore wind solicitations, where competition has been vigorous, there is a fundamental uncertainty regarding the quantity and quality of the bids that would be received under Tier 4 solicitation, and no guarantee that any bid will be received that advances the public interest. NYSERDA should therefore be free not to select projects under Tier 4. The white paper proposes a maximum procurement quantity of 3,000 megawatts, a reasonable upper bound, as it approximates the scale to the task of reducing New York City's reliance on fossil fuels. However, the draft order imposes a non-binding limit of 1,500 megawatts on NYSERDA's first Tier 4 solicitation. NYSERDA may exceed that limitation upon the receipt of proposals that are significantly compelling to warrant such a major commitment from the state. NYSERDA is directed to issue a Tier 4 solicitation within 60 days of this order. The solicitation should take a flexible approach to consider allowing both fixed or index REC bids. The proposal may consist of individual generation projects or portfolio of generation projects delivered over the same new transmission interconnection in Zone J. To maintain consistency and comparability with the offshore wind standard, Tier 4 agreements shall have a maximum contract tenure of 25 years rather than the 30 years proposed in the white paper. NYSERDA may negotiate with each proposer on price and other project-specific material terms so long as it allows an equal opportunity to negotiate with each qualified bidder. NYSERDA is authorized to offer any Tier 4 REC it obtains for resale to the voluntary market. Such resales shall be subject to a price floor at NYSERDA's procurement costs, including administrative costs. If resale revenues exceed procurement costs, the excess revenue should be directed by NYSERDA to energy efficiency programs in disadvantaged communities. Each LSC will be obligated to purchase qualified Tier 4 RECs, less any Tier 4 RECs resold to the voluntary market, in proportion to its overall share of the statewide load. The LSC compliance obligation will be administered in a manner similar to the ZEC program. NYSERDA is directed to file an implementation plan for stakeholder comment and ultimate commission approval that will include a description of the compliance obligation calculation, process, and structure, as well as a standard purchase agreement. The white paper again picked up a topic of repowering existing renewable facilities at the end of their useful life and allowing them to be eligible for Tier 1 RECs. The draft order adopts the white paper proposal on repowering with one modification. One of the proposed eligibility conditions for repowering was the replacement of the prime mover. However, as commenters noted, hydroelectric repowering can often involve substantial investment in physical plant other than the turbine, such as dams or intake structures, and may involve refurbishing rather than replacing the turbine. Therefore, hydroelectric resources should be required to meet all of the repowering eligibility criteria, including capital expenditures, but need not necessarily replace the prime mover. The CES framework order created a ZEC obligation on all LSEs in their proportional share of the statewide load. However, due to complexities with some of the New York Power Authority contracts, it was unable to satisfy the entirety of its allocated ZEC obligation. As a result of this, as well as several LSEs that ceased offering service in New York, NYSERDA has amassed a ZEC collection deficit of approximately $34 million and seeks to recover those funds. The white paper proposed using uncommitted funds to cover that shortfall. However, it now appears that those uncommitted funds will be allocated to other purposes. So the draft order directs NYSERDA to invoke the utility backstop as previously authorized for the purpose of collecting the ZEC deficit amount. Going forward, NYSERDA and staff should exclude the uncollectible portion of the NYPA load when determining the LSE obligation. Regarding administrative costs, historically, NYSERDA has filed separate petitions with the Commission to recover administrative costs for programs under the CES. The white paper proposes the administrative funding for all CES programs be addressed each year through one comprehensive annual funding request. Annually, NYSERDA will identify and quantify the funds needed to cover NYSERDA's costs and fees to administer the RES, the ZEC, and the offshore wind programs for each calendar year. The white paper notes that NYSERDA anticipates having sufficient quantities of Tier 1 and Tier 2 RECs and ZECs available for sale in 2021. It therefore proposes to fund administration of those programs through an adder beginning in 2021. NYSERDA's administrative costs for the respective programs would be allocated across the attributes NYSERDA sells annually to LSEs. Given that offshore wind and Tier 4 programs are not anticipated to produce attributes for sale in 2021, the white paper proposes to continue utilizing uncommitted SBC, EAPS, and RPS funds to cover administrative costs for those programs. The draft budget provides $1 million to support the execution of a Great Lakes wind feasibility study. This funding is included in the technical support for the offshore wind program. The draft order clarifies that the utility backstop mechanism is intended to address the financial risk of revenue shortfalls for all CES programs. The draft order institutes several reporting requirements. NYSERDA is directed to incorporate the competitive Tier 2 program reporting into the existing schedule of CES reports. The draft order also adopts the recommendation to replace the CES triennial review with a biannual review required under the CLCPA. The CLCPA's biannual review process will provide timely and in-depth information necessary to adjust to market conditions and the development of new technology. Additionally, NYPA and LIPA have indicated that they will each provide an annual report to NYSERDA of their intentions to contribute to the ZEC program at least 6 months prior to the start of any compliance year, which will allow NYSERDA to calculate the obligations of jurisdictional LSEs. NYPA and LIPA will also each provide NYSERDA with an annual report on their respective independent progress in pursuit of a statewide goal for integration into NYSERDA's overall CES reporting. Finally, the draft order approves the petition to establish a competitive Tier 2 program to support existing in-state wind and hydroelectric baseline facilities. The Tier 2 program will comprise a 5-year competitive program that would include 3 annual solicitations, with each solicitation procuring 1/3 of the overall program capacity. Each solicitation will procure 1/3 of the eligible RECs subject to a price cap. The draft order approves a funding cap of $200 million for the entire program. Facilities selected in the solicitation would receive a standard 3-year contract with NYSERDA. Eligible facilities would include in-state wind resources and privately owned run-of-the-river hydroelectric generators, regardless of the facility size, in commercial operations prior to January 1, 2015. The program will begin in 2021 with the issuance of the first request for proposal and continue through 2026 for transactions in 2025, the last full year of the program. NYSERDA is authorized to resell Tier 2 RECs that it purchases from generators. NYSERDA will sell Tier 2 RECs in the voluntary market at a price floor equal to the procurement costs plus NYSERDA's approved administrative adder. The white paper sought comments regarding NYPA's participation under the proposed competitive Tier 2, specifically an option for NYPA to satisfy its own Tier 2 obligation through self-supply. The draft order declines to place a Tier 2 obligation on on NYPA in recognition of its ongoing support for existing baseline renewable resources and deems NYPA's facilities ineligible to participate in the competitive Tier 2 program. NYSERDA will issue a Tier 2 solicitation within 120 days of the issuance of this order. This concludes my presentation, and staff is available to answer any questions you may have.
This is John Rhodes. Tom, thank you very much. Yours was a thorough and careful and serious presentation of a foundationally important item. New York's visionary climate and energy legislation and New York's need for a just and clean and resilient and affordable energy system requires us to build smart, economic, renewable energy. We need more of it, and we need it faster. This comprehensive and careful and ambitious plan delivers on those goals and will enable all needed kinds of renewable energy to reach New Yorkers in all parts of the state. I am going to support this item. Commissioner Berman, any questions or comments for Tom or anybody else?
Yes, thank you so much. So this is Commissioner Berman. I am not going to go page by page with the order, and I'm just going to pick a few things to highlight that stand out to me. As to the CES eligibility and the definition of renewable energy systems and the language in the order, I think we go into a tortured exercise in trying to figure out what is or is not eligible, what may or may not be eligible, in a way that seems to chill how technologies, new, emerging, current, may work together with other renewable sources in a way that actually may help from an innovative, economic, and cleaner environment. And so it seems more like a tortured exercise in figuring out ways to exclude and perhaps then also include favored technologies and exclude unfavored technologies, rather than looking at it in a more holistic way of what is being done from reliability, resiliency, and also by pairing some things together, whether that's actually helping economically as well as on the clean energy front. So it concerns me, and actually it raises to me whether what we should really be talking about is more, focus on allowing folks to figure out what works and showing us, the accountability for the different things we care about, rather than trying to be overly prescriptive in this. I do think we're going to have a number of questions on that come in the implementation phase. I think that there is a desire to have regulatory certainty and to help give NYSERDA the necessary flexibility and tools to conduct important solicitations, and to do so in a thoughtful and comprehensive way. My concern is, though, is that we have solicitations and RFPs throughout the state related to many of these issues that the CES is involved in, not just NYSERDA, but NYPA, LIPA, and others. And so for me, I think that we need to really look much more carefully at the guardrails that need to be in place to ensure that we are doing this in a responsible and fiscally accountable way that is very cognizant of the risks that are imposed upon the ratepayers in this, and also to look at some guardrails to give certainty to those folks who might want to be a part of the solicitations, so that they see the transparency and they see the regulatory certainty in how things are decided. I fear that there is not enough discussion on that. There's not enough detail to really inform and have proper solicitations, and we may have some unintended consequences, especially as it relates to overlapping information and things that those who are picking who is or is not a winner or a loser of a solicitation may also have other information that gets factored in a way that is unintended. And I think we really need to be very careful that we are doing all we can to make sure we have clear guardrails here in a way that is gives people the confidence that these solicitations can be done in a proper way, and actually help in what we're doing with our policy goals. And I don't see it here, and I think we need more in that. From the perspective that I certainly believe we may need to actually look at some outside entity to help us ensure the proper solicitations or the proper implementation of these solicitations are done, because I just am not sure that we're going to be able to give that regulatory certainty, which concerns me. To the extent that I think we need to truly care about our fiscal accountability and ensure, as we move on our clean energy policies, we are not being fiscally irresponsible. This also goes for caring about reliability and resiliency. And as I look at this, what stands out to me that makes me deeply pause is the discussion on the fact that due to the complexities of some of NYPA's contracts, they were unable to satisfy the entirety of its allocated ZEC obligation. And therefore, as a result of this, they've ceased offering service. A few of the LSCs have ceased offering service in New York, and NYSERDA has amassed a ZEC collection deficit of approximately $34 million, and now is seeking to recover those funds. I just find that unacceptable. We need to be able to have more accountability on the front end. And, you know, the CES triennial review, which was imposed in the August 2016 order, was supposed to be giving us information and insight in a way that was helpful. And it never really got deeply analyzed between staff and the commission. The intelligent information flowing that would give us that information to help just didn't happen. And so for me to now have a draft order that talks about adopting the recommendations to replace the CES triennial review with the biennial review doesn't work for me, because I didn't see that the CES triennial review really was used in a way that would have been helpful. You know, I guess there can be, you know, thinking that by moving it from triennial to biennial, that helps by that. But frankly, I don't know that it matters if it's only going to be a document that gets filed and then not really, you know, engaged on in any real way. The process, and again, the August 2016 order had so many references to the triennial review to have people feel comfortable that there would be a true analysis done that was being mindful of the prudency of what we needed to do from an accountability perspective on this, and just didn't happen. So I think we need to look more carefully at what the expectations are and what will be necessary for doing that. Additionally, the fact that the NYPA and LIPA are being asked to provide an annual report to NYSERDA of their intentions to contribute to the ZEC program, and, you know, at least 6 months prior to the start of any compliance year, which will allow NYSERDA to calculate the obligations of the jurisdictional LSEs. Yes, I think that's helpful. However, that to me is the bare minimum. NYPA and LIPA really need to look more carefully at their role in this. And it is not just about providing an annual report to NYSERDA on their respective independent progress in pursuit of the statewide goals for integration into NYSERDA's overall CES reporting. It's really much deeper than that. And I don't think they just get a pass to be able to, you know, just tell us what they are or aren't going to do. And as we saw, you know, recently with the ZEC obligations, you know, so they report what? That they later, that they're unable to satisfy the entirety of their allocated ZEC obligation. We need to get under the hood with that. We need to understand that. We also need to understand that that then has ramifications fiscally for others in terms of handling that. We consistently talk about these use of these uncommitted funds to cover other shortfalls, other programs, et cetera. And now, because these uncommitted funds, according to NYSERDA, will be allocated to other purposes, we're invoking the investor-owned utility backstop. That is a really dangerous thing. I'm really concerned. And again, it comes back to me. I care about our fiscal accountability. And I think that as we move on our clean energy policies, we cannot be fiscally irresponsible. This to me is fiscally irresponsible. And then further looking at the padding of it with further NYSERDA costs and other things, I just think at some point you can only get so much from the ratepayers. And we're asking again for, you know, this administrative funding. And I don't see how at this time, in light of what we're doing, without some more deep analysis and deep understanding and real conversation with folks, that I can feel comfortable, even though there are some good things in here. overall, I just am truly concerned that we are not taking this fiscal accountability as seriously as I think we should. So I'm a no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lisi, any comments or questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, I see this as a very valuable roadmap to the very near future of energy production and usage. It's a multifaceted plan, to be sure, to pursue and implement clean energy that will serve the public interest in a cost-effective manner. Today's report was a succinct version of the white paper. Many pages. A lot of effort and a lot of talent went into producing that. I would say it was not entertaining reading by any stretch of the imagination, but if it were meant to be entertaining reading, I would give it a bestseller. Good job by the staff, and I'll be supporting it.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Lisi. Commissioner Edwards.
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Let's just keep moving this along. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Howard.
I will be supporting this item as well. However, I'd be neglectful if I did not share many of Commissioner Berman's concerns going forward. We in New York, now through legislative mandate, are basically recapitalizing our electric system. We are adding well over in excess of 15,000 megawatts of brand new generation through offshore wind and various onshore programs, including storage. And that does not come for free. And how we ultimately pay for these things and how we enumerate the costs as we go forward, particularly since costs right now are largely guessed, and we haven't actually set them since most of these solicitations have not occurred. Again, I am very concerned that in our zeal and our effort to move to a zero carbon electric system, that we place burdens on ratepayers that are unacceptable. I have said probably from the beginning, and I said during my confirmation process, that I believe that exclusive use of ratepayer dollars to fund these new climate initiatives, and particularly as we recapitalize our energy system, both on the generation and transmission side, I don't believe we will see that it will be possible to completely finance it through bills. Additionally, I'm also concerned about the role of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and their ability to stymie some of our initiatives, and particularly in regarding how we deal with some of the legacy fossil providers and the overall competitive market as it exists today. Again, one thing I am gratified in this order is with dealing with Tier 4, that issue and any final action on that will require coming back to the Commission for approval of whatever materializes from that solicitation. But again, I think, and it's particularly ironic since I've now participated in a number of rate cases, that many of advocates, particularly on the environmental side, or any other advocates for clean energy, also decry any increases in utility bills for customers. It is yet to be seen if we can continue to do it the way we're doing it going forward, and I look forward to a new era where we have a more progressive nature of how we capitalize our new energy future. But that being said, I will be voting in favor.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Howard. So with that, we will move to a vote. For the record, this is John Rhodes. My own vote is in favor of the recommendation to approve the modifications of the Clean Energy Standard as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
No.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendation is adopted. We will now move to the fourth item for discussion, which is item 302, case 20E0197, as it relates to the criteria for identifying and designating priority transmission projects presented by Liz Grisaru, Deputy Director, Office of Electric, Gas, and Water. Tammy Mitchell and Robert Rosenthal, General Counsel, are available for questions. Liz, please begin.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Just checking. Good morning, Chair Rhodes and Commissioners. My name is Liz Grisaru. I am a Deputy Director in the Office of Electric, Gas, and Water. I am very pleased to present to you today this proposed order implementing a key step towards building the transmission system that will support our state's aggressive climate goals. The Accelerated Renewable Energy Growth and Community Protection Act, which we discussed at the July session, requires this commission to establish new transmission planning processes to ensure the, quote, timely and cost-effective construction of new, expanded, and upgraded distribution and transmission infrastructure, end quote. The specific purpose of the act is to build transmission to meet the clean energy and environmental targets established by the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which I will refer to here as the CLCPA. Consistent with that purpose, the Accelerated Renewable Energy Act charges the Commission with identifying a subset of transmission projects called priority transmission projects, or abbreviated as PTPs, that are distinct from other projects because they are needed on an expeditious basis to meet those CLCPA goals. The Act authorizes the New York Power Authority to undertake these PTPs subject to the concurrence of NYPA's trustees. However, the Act does not provide the Commission any guidance on how to define the projects that fall in this category. On July 2nd, 2020, Department staff and NYPA jointly filed a petition proposing a number of criteria to help the Commission make this determination. In that same filing, NYPA described a group of transmission investments that constitute the proposed Northern New York project and urged the Commission to designate the Northern New York project as a priority transmission project. In that petition, staff proposed 7 definitional criteria excuse me, which I will not describe here in detail, except to note that they include 1, the project's potential for unbottling existing renewable generation for delivery to load centers. 2, the project's potential to avoid future congestion that could impede delivery of expected renewable energy sources. And 3, whether an early in-service date for the project would increase the likelihood that the state will meet the CLCPA targets or enhance the value of other needed transmission investments. The draft order before you reviews the criteria and the statutory intent and concludes that both the need to unbottle existing renewable generation and the need to address potential congestion related to renewable generation that has yet to come online are indicators for a priority transmission project. Currently operating generators represent substantial state and private investments, and the fact that they are frequently curtailed due to transmission constraints suggests that our traditional planning processes have not kept pace with the state policy. This circumstance creates a need for expedited action. Further, when the proposed investment will also facilitate construction of renewable generation that is in the planning queue, an accelerated project brings additional benefits. Accordingly, the draft order before you modifies the staff criteria to recognize that the transmission investment's potential for unbottling existing renewable generation, as well as projects that are in the Nyso interconnection process for delivery to load centers in the state, thereby reducing the amount of new generation that must be constructed to meet the CLCPA targets, as the key factor in identifying a priority transmission project. The draft also recognizes that a priority transmission designation may also be appropriate where existing transmission planning processes will not solve the identified need in a time frame that supports the goals of the CLCPA. The point of this comparison, the point of comparison for this analysis is the Nysos public policy planning process, which can take approximately 18 months to evaluate and identify a solution to a transmission need. Thus, the draft order notes that where the Nyso process may not meet CLCPA deadlines, it may be necessary for the Commission to designate a priority transmission project. The draft order dismisses the remaining proposed criteria as not sufficiently tied to the legislative direction to identify those needs that have to be addressed on an expeditious basis. Having decided on the criteria, the draft order further finds that the Northern New York project qualifies as a priority transmission project. NYPA indeed makes a strong case for the urgency of this project, showing that the Northern New York project will unbottle existing renewable generation capacity in the region and will avoid approximately 7.5 terawatt hours of renewable generation curtailments annually. NYPA also points to the presence of approximately 2,400 megawatts of planned generation in the Nyso interconnection queue that would not be deliverable to downstate load without expansion of the Northern New York transmission network. Taken together, these factors strongly indicate that prompt action is necessary. In addition, the draft finds that NYPA's project can likely be placed in service faster than a project developed through the Nyso process, since it would be several months before NYPA could even submit the Northern New York project to the Nyso for evaluation. The draft order also shows that NYPA is indeed uniquely situated to undertake the Northern New York project, given that most of the improvements contemplated would be made to NYPA's existing transmission infrastructure, except for a component of national grid facilities that are connected to, or that is connected to NYPA's infrastructure. Thus, on the criteria adopted here, it is appropriate for the Commission to refer this project to NYPA for development. This completes my summary of the proposed order, and I am happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Liz. New York's visionary CLCPA legislation, which we already discussed today, calls for transformational quantities of renewable energy, which in turn means smart new transmission that connects that power to customers. Today, we can adopt well-designed new rules to specifically expedite transmission investments that can unbottle existing and new renewables to do that. And we can also designate as the first investment under those new rules, NYPA's Northern New York project to complete a critical link in our upstate grid and unbottle somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 megawatts of renewable energy. This is a compelling opportunity, and I'm going to be in favor of the rules and of designating this as the first priority project under those rules. Commissioner Berman, any comments or questions for the team?
Thank you, Commissioner Berman. So I do have a couple of questions, just looking for a little bit more clarity. And thank you, Liz. I think you did a nice job laying out the order itself. So the staff had proposed 8 different criteria for looking at what could be used for PTP under Section 7, Subdivision 5 of the Act. And it looks, I guess I just want to make sure I'm clear here. What we're really saying is that 2 of the 8 are rejected. The 5th one being the ability of the transmission investment to progress expeditiously based on factors as the planning and design status of the transmission investment. So it is taking out that expedited focus, and then rejecting the 7th criteria, which was whether designating the transmission investment as a priority project will advance other state policy goals, including those expressed in the Act and the CLCPA. Can you first expand upon why those 2 were rejected? Liz, I think.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm a little hoarse today. First, I'll just say that actually there are 7 criteria. The 8th is a catch-all, such other things as the commission may deem important, but there are really 7. The 5th and the 6th criterion sort of share a similar weakness in that the key exercise presented to the commission in the Act is not to determine whether or not this is a good project, but to determine whether or not this is a project that, because of the urgent nature of the need, has to be done quickly and has to be done in a short time frame. So, for example, the fact that a project may bring other benefits doesn't sufficiently distinguish any potential priority transition project from any other project that serves CLCPA goals, or for that matter, a transmission project that serves reliability aims. So the 6th the criterion that looks to the service of other policy goals is really not a very good indicator of why this project should be taken out of the ordinary transition planning process and put into something different. That's the basic rationale there. I think your other question was about criterion 5, am I right? The ability to progress expeditiously based on planning and design factors?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, it's not that those are rejected. It's rather that the order says, look, these are important development capabilities that we understand NYPA has and that we believe are we expect NYPA will employ in making sure that a project that is needed urgently gets done in a short time frame. But again, these factors don't actually help you distinguish between a project that should go into the NYSO planning process, for example, and another project that should go via the PTP pathway. Does that help?
Thank you. I think that is important to clarify that, and so I appreciate you taking that time. I guess for me, I just I look at it as primarily the folks that participated and gave comments in this proceeding were generally supportive, right? Embark was supportive of the staff criteria. NRDC and Alliance for Clean Energy New York submitted comments supporting it. They would also, rightfully so, would like to see faster the state progressing in building transmission, and others also focused on being positive with this and wanting to help promote efficient outcomes in NYSERDA's procurement processes, et cetera. For me, we also need to be, and I think the order tries to, be mindful of the fact that, frankly, the ISO process is a good one. And it is something that we need to ensure that we are working in a way with the ISO that helps us so that we're being complementary in this process as to dealing with transmission investments and which way you go. And frankly, the use of a PPT outside of that process should be very, few and far between, to the extent that, the ISO process is one that I think is, frankly, the one to go with for the most part, unless there's some real urgency that we can't do that, but yet it is done in a very, in a way that does not undervalue or take away from what the ISO is doing. I would note that the order does make mention that, in a footnote, that the ISO has made adjustments to its project evaluation and selection process, and that the ISO estimates that the approximate timeframe for that process is about 18 months. And the draft order, urges them to further their work to reduce the decision-making time. I do just want to take a process point here, in that the ISO process substantively is a very good one. And I think that they and the relevant stakeholders are working in other ways to speed up that decision-making process. But they should not short circuit anything that is done substantively in a way that there would be unintended consequences from that. And, we can also take lessons in looking at what we do to be substantively appropriate and mindful of what we need to do, and also reduce some of our own decision-making processes, but not shirk our responsibility or regulatory responsibilities. The question I do have for you next, Liz, is the order does reference that NYPA may pursue projects as its trustees authorize, regardless of the commission's determination on the PTP question. Could you expand on that?
I could take that on, Liz, if you would like. This is Bob.
Sure.
So it's just a matter of course. Obviously, NYPA has its own board. That language parallels the language in the statute. We can't direct NYPA to the Public Service Commission cannot direct NYPA to undertake this project. We can approve it for the NYPA board consideration, and then the NYPA board has to approve the project and can direct NYPA to undertake the project. It's just taking into account the board's role.
That's fair, and I appreciate that. So what are the next steps then after this as it comes to the commission?
I don't expect the commission will need to take any further steps until such time as NYPA and any partner NYPA may engage in this project comes in with an Article 7 application.
Okay, and then it would be in Article 7, correct?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions. I am mindful that this is our first project that we are doing under this framework, and it's one that I think has really tried to focus on the appropriateness of this because of the relevant substantive issues, the need to do this because this project it is one that is necessary. I'm going to be voting for it. However, I do just want to, focus on the fact that I do think the ISO process works well, and that should be one that is our go-to. And we really need to be very careful that this is not then the get around. In fact, we should be working very carefully with the ISO and other stakeholders. And I do agree with multiple interveners that the ISO process and several of the things that could be done is something that can help in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lisi, any comments or questions?
No, simply to say I concur with the chair and I'll be supporting this.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Edwards?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Howard?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the staff's good work on this. The Northern New York project, which may be new to certain folks on the commission, is not a new project and has been sitting on the drawing boards for some time in different iterations. And a consensus project like that with clear economic and environmental benefits is easy to do. I think this process becomes much more difficult going forward as we design transmission infrastructure for projects that have yet to become reality, and how we allocate those costs and becomes much more difficult. The easy ones are terrific. The going forward ones are far more difficult, far larger potential capital investments, more disruption of communities for large transmission projects. And again, as I would say every time I will speak, that cost containment and doing that on a lowest cost basis, not necessarily exclusively for the environmental benefits that any given project may do, but again, how we prioritize them and put them in the queue needs to be considered on an economic basis as well. With that being said, I'll be supporting the item.
Thank you very much. With that, I will proceed to call for, let's proceed to the vote. For the record, I'm John Rhodes, and my own vote is in favor of the recommendation to adopt the criteria and designate the Northern New York project as a priority transition project as discussed. Commissioner Berman, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Lisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Edwards, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Howard, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. The item is approved and the recommendation is adopted. We will now move to the consent agenda. I will roll call our way through the commissioners and ask them if they wish to comment on or recuse from voting on any items on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman?
Thank you. I do have several items I'm going to comment on. It's not that long, but I do have a few. I'm going to bundle 164, 165, and 166 together. 164 is the National Grid tariff to modify its gas tariff schedule as it relates to establishing a firm demand response program. I very much am in favor of granting this. However, I am concerned with some of the what I see as inappropriate jabs at the company in a way that I personally feel that we need to be mindful that the company is doing, as all companies are doing, a lot in the demand response space. There are challenges over the years looking at non-firm demand response customers. We've had several collaboratives. We've discussed things, looking at ways that we could work with folks. And for me, I am I am concerned that in both 164 and 165, we seem to give higher level of scrutiny of the company than in other comparisons to other. And in fact, the company brought in 164, just making sure I have my notes right, in 164, the company brought this to us, this tariff request, back in February, and there were several postponements, 3 postponements to addressing this issue, because the staff was seeking further review. And so they made that request, it was granted, and now we are here now. As I look at it, I don't see anything in the file that indicates that the staff wanted more information to have more complete details on the planned firm DR program. It was the first time that I heard right before this commission that there was, a concern about needing a more robust plan engaged on that. There's nothing in the file. This situation, was not necessarily highlighted. And in fact, when I looked through all of the different monitoring reports and other things with the independent monitor and staff engagement, it didn't seem like it was, flagged as this being a problem. And so I am supportive of the item. I am not supportive of what I see as trying to put it all on the company for this issue. I think we need to be much more engaged in a collaborative way. And I think it's too important for us to somehow seem to try to make this now a failure of the company, because ultimately I think that we could work better together. On 165 as well, there are a number of, we're looking at it from a waiver perspective because of the need to, it makes sense, we're granting that. However, the affidavit issue is not just with National Grid, and it is something that has been a challenge. I've sat through many collaborative discussions over the years with stakeholders that were noticed, discussing this issue, discussing some of the compliance problems with this. And while I think it's really important, I think that over the years the company has done a pretty good job, and it continues to be a challenge. And I would have liked to have heard from staff in a formal way beforehand, as well as also getting from the company their response to what the staff was saying. So I'm concerned about that. I am going to vote both for 164 and 165, but I think it's important for us to take a look at what we need to do as regulators in addressing these issues in a more holistic and positive way. On 166, I'm a no. I do not appreciate a one commissioner order at the 11th hour looking to move money from one pot under the settlement that would have gone to the program that was dedicated under the settlement for customers. In a sense, from my perspective, to move it now to pay the fees that are incurred for the monitor. We still have not, as a commission, had a formal engagement on all of the activities of the monitor and the report in a way that would be helpful to me. I do understand that the monitor has done a lot. However, I'm not really sure that our focus should be on quickly acting on moving money to address this issue, and certainly not as a one commissioner order now seeking to be confirmed. It should have been something that was flagged much earlier and more fiscally responsible, and then looking at what this means and evaluating this issue. So I'm voting no on that item. On 374, which is the Long Island Power Authority petition to amend Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Need granted by order dated May 14th, 2010. I do want to raise two issues, or three issues actually, on this. I just need to get my notes. Hold on one moment. I can't find my notes, so I'll just do it off the top of my head. In the order, it discusses that there was not a need to do a hearing. I think that's right. I think that legally we were not required to, under the law, to have them hold a hearing. I do believe that that was a correct determination legally. However, due to the public sensitivity of this matter and the importance of safety, I believe a hearing, however discretionary it may have been, would have been a good idea. So, you know, that does concern me. The second thing is that the order states that the commission will, the LIPA will be submitting the amended plan to the commission for approval. And I think that's a good thing. I appreciate that. However, I think the order should be clearer that we have the authority to approve, deny, or modify that amended plan. I am sensitive to that issue because of our limited oversight over LIPA. And I do think that when we have orders, and this is not unique to other situations, when we have orders that say that the plan will come back for approval to the commission, I do think that it's technically more accurate to say that the commission has the authority to approve, deny, or modify. There had been an issue on another matter unrelated to this at the LIPA board that didn't come before us, but among the LIPA board itself, discussing whether the board could approve, modify, or deny something, and it was either approve or not, and there was no modification ability. It was a separate issue, unrelated, but it does make me pause in that we should be very clear in our order so there's no miscommunication to LIPA on the amended plan. As well as I do think that the language that says that after that after 2021, when that plan is filed and approved, modified, or denied, that the LIPA will just file an annual report to the commission for review. That may or may not be appropriate at that time. I would like us to, especially because of the sensitivity of this issue, and it is a safety issue, I would like to really make sure that the commission is carefully weighing in on this and not just relying after the fact on an annual review that may not actually come before the commission for that. May be appropriate at some time to just allow that, but for right now, I think it's too important of an issue to have that in the order. On 375, which is the Build Ready program, I am a no. I am very, it is not that I'm opposed to the program. In fact, I am a supporter of the program. However, the order of it itself, I don't think allows true fiscal accountability. And in fact, we have to care about that fiscal accountability. And as I've said in the 301 order, as we move on our clean energy policies, we cannot be fiscally irresponsible. Couple of things I want to say about this order. There is in the order a reference to that the Act, CLCPA, that the Act directs NYSERDA to submit a petition to the Commission describing the activities it has taken and plans to undertake in furtherance of the stated policy goals. Yes, that's correct. Along with a request for funding as may be appropriate to support the activities for at least 5 years. But the order says that pursuant to the Act, the Commission must then issue an order within 4 months from the submission of that petition. That is in fact correct. That is what the Act says. However, it does not mean then that we have to, make sure this is all done. The order, I think, could have been much more thoughtful in addressing formally what we are seeking and what we want, rather than sort of leaving it then to NYSERDA on many of the details that I just think, in light of the significant amount of money we're talking about here, NYSERDA anticipates a total program spending through 25 on this program to be approximately $71.8 billion. This is going to include NYSERDA salary and overhead, technical costs, consultants, legal support, system development, et cetera. I'm not even sure that NYSERDA has the full expertise to do all of this. And likely we may be looking at, like we looked at in other things, with a need for even more dollars. And I just really am concerned. The other thing is, I think ACE New York set up a really good proposal in its comments on creating a formal mechanism for developers to propose potential build-ready sites to NYSERDA, and we're declining that. And I would say that I am a little concerned. I think we should have had a little bit more engagement on the four corners of what all that will look like. I think it's too important, and there's not enough details at this time. And I also wonder, for a lot of the dollars that we're spending in this area, how much of these costs normally would have been borne by private developers that now NYSERDA, through state monies, ratepayer money, is actually taking on itself. While I appreciate NYSERDA taking a lead on this, I am concerned that not only is this going to require a lot of figuring out how this is all going to work and learning, I worry that we're taking on costs that normally shouldn't have been borne by us. And the other issue for me is that really it comes down to the fiscal prudency here and going to the financial backstop guarantee mechanism. I just don't see that we're ever going to get further if we don't have a real comprehensive discussion on what we're doing as to the costs. So I am a no on 375. Thank you. I have no further comments.
Thank you very much. Just for accuracy, Commissioner Berman, I have you as a no on 166 and a no on 375. I do not recall what you were on 374.
374, I'm a yes. I was just pointing out the three things that I'm concerned about with that. And 164 and 165, I am a yes, but again, I have concerns on that.
Thank you very much. That's very clear. Thank you. Commissioner Lisi, any comments on the consent agenda items?
No comments. I'll be supporting the entire agenda.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Edwards?
No comments, no questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Howard?
Yes, I have one comment on item 561, the Frontier Communications bankruptcy workout. I want to take this opportunity to praise our staff for securing significant dollars for service improvements for Frontier customers. As we all know, Frontier has been a difficult and troubled company for some time and probably leads our state in a number of complaints vis-a-vis customer service. So to the extent that we were able to secure guaranteed funds for customer, for service quality improvement, I find that terrific and job well done by the staff. Other than that, I will be supporting the consent again.
Thank you very much. With that, we will proceed to vote on the consent agenda. This is John Rhodes for the record. My own vote is in favor of the recommendations on the consent agenda. Commissioner Berman, with the adjustments we just noted, how do you vote?
Yes on all others. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Lisi, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Edwards, how do you vote?
I vote yes.
Thank you very much. And Commissioner Howard, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you very much. The items are approved and the recommendations are adopted. I would like to mention a couple of other items since we are done with our regular business before I ask if there's anything further. The first is to recall that this is October and to note that Governor Cuomo has recognized October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in New York State. Every minute in the United States, 20 people are victims of domestic violence. To stop this violence, to stop this scourge, please be an ally to those in need and help raise awareness by wearing purple on October 22, which is next week. If you need help or know of anybody that needs help, please call. Call 800-942-6906. This matters. Equally important, we have a special occasion today, a bittersweet one, which is to note that today is John Scherer's last session. John's been at the department, worked at the department for over 32 years, beginning as an auditor trainee in 1988 and advancing up through the ranks and through just the tremendous record of contributions to his current position as Deputy Director for the Office of Accounting, Audits, and Finance, a position he took up in 2013. He graduated from Siena College in 1988 with a BBA degree majoring in accounting. John is a remarkable colleague, and there are a couple of remarkable points that loom large to me anyway. One is just how knowledgeable he is. He's knowledgeable about general accounting, of regulatory accounting, of electric policy, and none of these are for the faint of heart. I can prove that just by going through a list of stuff that he is an expert on. So utility property taxes, utility pensions, other utility post-employment benefits known as OPEB, EBCAP adjustments, O&M expenses and forecasts, federal income tax, rate case components, and rate case drivers. And while he's at it, he's also become something of a master of both legal and engineering aspects of the work. None of this is easily acquired knowledge. It's the fruit of really hard work, of a dedication to mastering the subject, and also of applying that knowledge usefully and concretely for the benefit of the work. Another remarkable point to me is his ability to communicate. What he talks about and talks to us about is really technical, it's really complex, and it's absolutely possible to get lost, but not when John is explaining it. He takes you through it, he makes you understand the important points, and it's really a remarkable gift of making things in the end simple enough to grasp, without giving up on any of, without losing any of the important stuff that's buried in the complexity. It's really a terrific gift and one that we've all really benefited from. And then finally, there's a personal quality to John, which I can only describe as really being the model professional colleague, which is kind of a long-winded way of saying he really cares, to put it in a nutshell. He cares about the work, about the purposefulness of the work, and about the quality of the work. He cares about the team, how they're doing, how they're growing. He cares about the department, the larger team, and he cares about the mission to serve New Yorkers. And he's earned all of our respect and admiration and affection. So I said this is a bittersweet moment. The bitter moment is that John will be leaving us. The sweet part of the moment is that John, at the end of this month, gets to begin a long and absolutely well-earned vacation leading up to his retirement at the end of the year. He's not going to be lacking for things to do in retirement. He's going to be able to spend more time hunting with his 2 dogs, fishing, traveling, and golfing. As a longtime member of the Golf League, I'm told this is true. I don't know this firsthand. He was one of the best golfers in department history, and we expect he will be seen on the links with some of these colleagues here today as we go forward. And he will also be able to spend happily more time with his family, including his wife, Luann, who used to be with us as well. Thank you, Luann, and his son, Brian, and daughter, Anna. John is a great colleague. We will miss him deeply, but he's earned our affection and earned our best wishes as he heads off into a long and rich retirement. Congratulations, John. I don't know if any of my colleagues have thoughts they want to share, but I throw the floor open.
This is Commissioner Berman. Thank you so much. I just want to say on a personal level that I'm going to miss you. We were staff colleagues together many years ago, and then continued to enjoy a very great professional and personal relationship when I became a commissioner. You are a hard worker, a good team player, and truly you will be missed dearly. Life out there holds so much more for you, and I am really excited for your family that you're now going to be able to be with them full time. And don't be afraid to explore all that life has to offer to the fullest. And congratulations on your retirement, and just know that you will be missed. Thank you.
Hi, this is Commissioner Edwards. Just best wishes to you and your family, and thank you for all of your years of service. It's probably the best time to retire with everything that has been going on this year, to be able to just take a minute and spend some quality time. So congratulations and thank you.
If I may, it's Jim Alisi. Just want to wish you all the best, and fishing, hunting, and golf, and more time with your family. Who could ask for more than that? All good things.
This is Commissioner Howard, and I'm a living example of just because you said you retire doesn't mean you can't come back into public service. So again, all the best.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you all for your kind words. It's been a privilege and an honor to work with all of you, and I wish you the best going forward. Thank you.
That's absolutely terrific. Secretary Phillips, is there anything further to come before us today?
There is nothing further to come before you, but I would like to request clarification on the last consent vote for Commissioner Berman. Commissioner Berman, can you please, I know that the chair asked, but I just want to be absolutely certain, of the 160s, can you please tell me which ones are no?
Thank you. I am a no on the one commissioner order, confirming the one commissioner order.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much all for a long and productive day. And thank you again, John Chair, for allowing us to end on a high note. We are adjourned.